Many people fantasize about owning their private island, often envisioning it set in the idyllic warm waters of the Caribbean or South Pacific. Yet, Gananoque, a quaint town situated along the St. Lawrence River in Ontario, Canada, is part of the Thousand Islands region, where both Canadians and Americans reside on these islands. Some of these islands even boast castles, and despite their location in the St. Lawrence River rather than the tropics, they stand as impressive as any found worldwide. One popular tale linked to the Thousand Islands is the story of a salad dressing, allegedly created by a local woman and later introduced to a New York hotel around 1890, though no written records substantiate this claim. Back when I used to drive trucks for a living, I was responsible for delivering goods across the 48 contiguous states and Canada for a mid-sized company with around 100 trucks. As a driver, I had the choice of taking long hauls, regional routes, or local deliveries. After a lengthy trip lasting a week or more, we had the option to stay local for a week to spend time with family or hit the road for longer assignments again. Occasionally, we could even bring our wives along. Unlike many trucking companies that keep their drivers on the road for extended periods, affecting family life, this company offered some flexibility. Trucking, like the military and law enforcement, often strains family relationships, and I've seen firsthand how demanding these professions can be. During high school summers, I worked in construction, so transitioning to full-time work after graduation felt natural. By the time I was 23, I had honed my skills as a carpenter. At 19, I met Emma Davis, an office clerk at a commercial bakery, and we got married at 21. We were content until both the banking and construction sectors took a nosedive. Emma and I decided it would be beneficial for me to try truck driving for better pay, despite the downside of being away from home. The company proposed to cover my truck driving school expenses if I committed to a year with them. After acquiring my Class A CDL within 3 weeks, I was paired with a seasoned instructor who taught me how to manage loaded trailers weighing between 16 to 36 tons. Initially scheduled for 5 weeks of training, I managed to convince the safety department of my readiness in just 4. Following a week in the city and another on local roads, everything proceeded without a hitch. I arranged for Emma to pick up my paycheck on Fridays from the office, which worked out well. After 9 months, while wrapping up a week of local driving, my dispatcher presented a promising opportunity. I had a load heading to Vancouver with a return trip to Montreal, or rather, to Gananoque. The young company owner, only a few years older than me, had recently purchased one of the Thousand Islands, which came with 2 houses. He wanted the main house furnished with handcrafted furniture from Vancouver Island, but the furniture wouldn't be ready for another month. The operations department decided to surprise him with an early delivery. Here's the deal. You can't tell anyone, not even his wife. I'm not implying she'll spill the beans, but since she picks up your paycheck, she might let something slip. The boss and his wife will be there next weekend, around the time you return. You'll head to Vancouver, load up, and then come back. Is this something you're interested in? Before I could reply, she cut me off. Remember, whether you accept or not, you must keep this confidential. Do you promise? I agreed and promised not to tell anyone. Good. Since you've taken the assignment and because I liked you, have you seen that brand new Peterbilt in the yard? I told her I had. Well, it's yours. Load your stuff into it. Your cargo is in trailer 2353. You can leave in the morning. Call me when you arrive in Vancouver. And be careful, she instructed. When I got home, I told Emma about my upcoming trip to the West Coast. She was fine with the good pay, but neither of us liked the idea of me being away for almost 2 weeks. To make up for it, we treasured our night together. Our lovemaking was always special. Emma was always enthusiastic. Early in my trucking career, we took some intimate photos so I could carry a piece of her with me. Whenever I drove to Canada, her photos stayed in a bag on my seat, never checked during the rigorous border searches after the first time. Leaving was straightforward. crossing the border was routine with courteous Canadian officials. During the search, Linda called to inform me that the boss's furniture was ready and had been transported from the island that day. Unloading and reloading took several hours. I then headed back east, fully loaded. Returning via Detroit, the drive to Montreal took roughly 9 hours. In Kingston, I parked for the night and called Linda. At 6 a.m., we loaded a barge for the island. The route was simple but slow. The forested island led to the guest house, where I was stunned to find my wife with the boss, her bosom being rubbed with what I initially thought was sunscreen. As I approached, I realized it was indeed sunscreen, but the woman with him was not just anyone, she was my wife. They were taken aback as I briefly spoke to them and then walked away without waiting for a response. Back at the dock, realizing I was stranded on the island, I noticed several boats tied up there. Taking a boat was my only way back. Using some basic knowledge from TV and movies, I found the keys, started a boat, and hastily made my way back to town, causing some damage to it on arrival. The boat drifted away as I departed for Kingston Airport, where I bought a ticket for a flight to New York. Emma had left a voicemail on my phone. Her message simply read, "Please call me back." I called her back. "Linda?" I asked. "Good morning, Tom. Did you?" Her message trailed off. "Linda, good morning. Did you succeed?" I pressed. "How long, Linda?" I demanded. "How long for what?" she replied, sounding confused. "How long has he been sleeping with my wife?" I asked. "What are you talking about?" she responded. "Is she there? Is she okay? How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. Linda, sounding panicked, replied, "About 3 months. I'm really sorry, Tom. His wife had to be there, otherwise, would never have sent you. So you sent me off knowing full well that my wife was involved with the boss?" I pressed. "Who else knows about this?" "Just Mark and me," she admitted. "Thank you, Linda." "Thanks a lot," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Hold on, where are you? What are you planning to do?" "Hold on, he's on the other line." "I'll be right back," she said urgently. "Screw you," I muttered as I ended the call. Now it made sense why she didn't want me to tell Emma about the trip. Emma might have spilled the beans to Lawrence, wrecking the surprise. The small airport gave me a clear view of everyone coming and going, but neither Emma nor Lawrence appeared. The flight was brief. Once I landed, I rented a car and drove the 4 hours home, only to find Emma wasn't there. I was consumed by thoughts of what I might do next. While driving home, my phone rang again. It was another message from Linda. "Tom, if you're home, I'm on my way. Please don't do anything until I arrive so we can talk. We never had sex, Tom. We just fooled around. Please believe me. Never had sex. Are you kidding me?" I thought, seething with disbelief. Did she really think I was that naive? When I reached my apartment, I loaded my pickup truck with everything I wanted and headed over to the terminal. Linda and Mark were there, and neither of them met my gaze. "How much money do I owe you, Linda?" I demanded. "Tom, she began. "Write me a check for everything the company owes me, now," I insisted. "Sorry, Tom. Mr. Lawrence said not to give you anything until he talks to you," she explained. "Linda, you owe me." "Thanks a lot," I retorted curtly. "He said you damaged one of his boats," she added. "What else did he say? Was he bragging about sleeping with my wife? Did you all have a good laugh at my expense? Did Emma come here and tell you to keep me off the road as long as possible?" I demanded. "Write me a check, Linda, or I'll wreck this whole damn office," I threatened. It took her a few minutes to calculate what I was owed. She called accounting and instructed them to issue me a check. When I got to the accounting department, they had everything ready. I glanced at it and changed my mind. "Transfer it to my card, please," I requested. "But Tom, it's direct deposit," they hesitated. "Now, please," I insisted. I provided them with my card number, and they processed it. Lawrence wouldn't be able to stop the direct deposit payment. I then went to Lawrence's house. We had visited there for a picnic before. I suspected my wife had more reasons to be there than just for picnics. "Mrs. Lawrence answered the door, looking pale and unwell. "What can I do for you?" she asked. "My name is Tom Harris. I used to drive for your husband. This morning, while delivering furniture to your island, I saw him massaging my wife's bare chest with one hand while his other hand roamed below her waist. I thought you should know." "Have a good day," I said. "Wait a minute, mister. What did you say your name was?" she asked, puzzled. "Harris." "Tom Harris," I replied. "What is your wife's name?" she inquired. "Emma Harris," I answered. "Did you see this morning?" she pressed. "With my own eyes," I confirmed. "Are you sure?" she asked again. "Lady, of course I'm sure. Do you really think I'd make something like that up about my own wife?" I shot back. I walked to my truck and drove off, unsure of my destination. I headed to my parents' house and quickly filled them in. Mom always had coffee ready and handed me a cup. I accepted it and stretched out on the sofa, closing my eyes. The next thing I heard was my father's voice, "Emma, get off my porch or I'll call the police." "But I need to talk to Tom," she pleaded. "After what you did to him?" "No way," Dad replied. "But he doesn't understand," she insisted. "Oh, I think he understands perfectly. You slept with his boss for 3 months. What's so hard to understand?" Dad responded. "But he doesn't know why," she protested. "Of course he knows. You're a traitor, that's why. Now get off my porch," he demanded. Emma started screaming my name. "Tom, talk to me. Please, Tom, give me a chance to explain." Her cries grew fainter as exhaustion took over, and I soon fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to my truck, still uncertain of where to go, but determined to go somewhere. I opened the door to sit down and found Emma sleeping across the seat. As soon as she heard the door open, she sat up. I started to walk away, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me back. "Please, Tom, listen to me." I had no choice, she pleaded. "You either let someone have sex with you or you don't, right, Emma?" I asked. "Everything was wrong," she admitted. "So you had sex willingly," I stated, not questioned. "Tom, just give me a chance," she begged. "I repeat, you had sex willingly," I reiterated. "Okay, I had sex willingly, but besides, you lied. We never had sex. We just fooled around a little," she tried to downplay. "God, did you really think I'd believe that?" I said. "Get out of my truck," I demanded. When she didn't move, I pulled her out of the truck. Enraged, I drove off before she could get up. I went to a fast food restaurant for breakfast, ordered, and ate in silence. Afterward, I went to the bank to divide our money. My phone rang several times, and there were numerous messages. Among them was one from my former employer, Jack T. Lawrence. "Call me and let's talk, or I'll sue you for crashing my boat. You'll end up in jail for threatening my employees. And don't think I won't do it," was his first message. The second message read, "Listen, I slept with your wife. Deal with it. This happens every day. She's not the first wife I've been with, and she won't be the last. Swallow your pride. Take her back and punish her if necessary. That's what she likes and wants. If you don't, maybe I'll keep doing it. Now get back here and drive my truck home, or I'll report you for theft. Plus, you owe me 3 more months to cover your truck driving school. What an idiot. So he was still in Canada. I called his wife, hoping to meet her rather than rushing back to his house. She agreed, and I played the messages for her. She had been sick before, but after hearing the messages, she felt even worse. At first, I wasn't sure I believed you, but now I do, Mrs. Lawrence said, her resolve hardening. I'm going to make his life hell. May I have a copy of that message? We made a copy for her, and I took note. What are you going to do about your wife? She asked. Divorce her, of course. I just don't know how to go about it, I replied. It's simple, she said. Find a good lawyer and hire him. It sounded almost too easy. I left her house and went back to my parents, who also wanted to know my plans. I told them the same thing I'd shared with Mrs. Lawrence. My father echoed Mrs. Lawrence's advice word for word, and it convinced me to start looking for a lawyer. With no idea where to begin, I started with the letter F in the phone book. I made it to D before I found a lawyer named Michael Green. We hit it off right away. Green came from a family of truck drivers, but his career took a sharp turn after a car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. He graduated from law school in a wheelchair and was the only member of his family not in the trucking business. Despite this, they all knew and respected Jack T. Lawrence. Green noted several times Lawrence's business prowess and popularity. He's a well-known figure, Green said. Everyone who knows him respects him. He sponsors sports teams, supports arts programs, and donates to every charity that comes his way. When I first told Green about what I discovered in Canada, he was skeptical and seemed to side with Lawrence. I almost left to find another lawyer, but then I decided to play the messages for him. He finally began to believe me. This will certainly shake up the community if it gets out. How do you want to handle this? Keep it private or make a splash? Green asked. All I want is a divorce as cheaply as possible, I said. If this mess ends up in the newspapers, so be it. But I want the reason for the divorce to be infidelity. No lies about irreconcilable differences. She cheated, and that's what will be on record. It can be tricky if that's all you have, Green warned. Courts today almost require visual evidence, especially when accusing someone of Lawrence's stature. Well, let's give it a try, I decided. Fine, Green agreed. We'll serve her the documents in the next few days. Do you know where she might be? Either at work, at the bakery, at home, or maybe in Canada with him, I said. Of course, we can't serve documents to her in Canada, so we'll start at home or work, he noted. That works for me. You can reach me by mobile or at my parents' house, I said. Tired of living with my parents, I spent the next few days searching for an apartment. I found one that wasn't the fanciest or best in town, but it was mine. A week later, Emma was served with divorce papers at work. My father owned a small welding shop. Although I had never shown interest in welding, he convinced me to come work for him, believing it would get me out of my apartment. Both he and my mother felt I was spending too much time indoors. I thought about working for another transport company but wasn't enthusiastic about it, so I started at the welding shop. My dad had a pickup truck with portable welding equipment, and mostly, he repaired things or created custom pieces on request. Emma tried to talk to me several times, but once she was served, everything went through our lawyers. Our first meeting was about a month later. Her lawyer attempted to get the infidelity charge dropped, but I refused. Emma was desperate to keep Lawrence's name out of the divorce suit, fearing it would ruin his reputation. This could damage his standing in society, she argued. Are you serious? I exploded. He's a wife-stealing slug and should be exposed to the public. Emma countered, if you had treated your wife better, he wouldn't have been able to steal her. This led to a heated argument, which could only be halted by separating us into different rooms. Once we were back together, she again tried to convince me to drop Lawrence's name from the petition. "I'm not going to do that, so forget about it," I said firmly. "Why are you trying so hard to protect him? Are you planning to marry him? Are you still sleeping with him?" "FYI, he and I are still dating, so yes, I'm still sleeping with him," Emma admitted. Her lawyer groaned and laid his head on the table. "Without lifting it," he said, "you've just admitted to your husband and 2 bailiffs that you committed infidelity. This is probably the worst thing you could do at this point." "I don't care," Emma said. "And to answer your other question, yes, I'm going to marry him as soon as he's divorced." "So you think he loves you?" I asked. "Certainly," she replied. I placed my phone on the table and scrolled through Lawrence's messages to her. "That's not what he said." "He's just playing you," I said. Mr. Green chuckled as he pulled an envelope from his briefcase and slid it across the table to Emma. Her lawyer intercepted it, opened it, and reviewed the contents. The envelope contained a note and a series of photos. Emma examined the photos first, then read the note aloud. "Mr. Harris, these may help with your divorce. The first 5 were taken on the island 3 weeks ago with my hairdresser's wife. The next 6 were from last week when I was away. He picked up a woman at a bar. It was just another fling, like your wife's." The photos showed Lawrence with the 2 women in various stages of undress and intimate positions, leaving no doubt about his infidelities. Emma pushed the photos away and left the room, only to return to court where everything, money, jewelry, china, and her clothes, was divided. She stayed in their apartment, and Lawrence's reputation plummeted. His sports teams folded, and Nina received half of everything, including their home and half of the moving company. He only kept the Canadian island because Nina didn't want it. Lawrence billed my lawyer for truck driving school, claiming breach of contract, which prompted a colorful response from Mr. Green. Nina called to disregard it and offered me an operations manager position at a trucking company. It was tempting, but I declined. Over time, I discovered a knack for metalwork thanks to Dad's guidance. Dating came and went, seldom lasting. Lawrence's business was sold, and Nina vanished into the ether. He would occasionally make a reappearance, but never seemed to recognize me from our shared past. I found solace in welding and crafting metal goods at the shop, creating everything from weather vanes to decorative mailbox stands. One quiet Sunday, Emma showed up unexpectedly, seeking a conversation. "Can we talk?" she asked. "I don't have much to say," I responded. "Just listen," she insisted. She began, "I'm not here to make excuses. We had a good life, money, love. So why Lawrence?" "Partly because of his lies about you, his constant absences, and the mistreatment. He convinced me that every trucker cheats, and I bought into it." Linda backed him up, claiming Lawrence treated me well. Mrs. Lawrence supposedly condoned his affairs to keep the marriage intact. It was all deceit, but I was too naive to see it. Now I know better. I remained silent, letting her words sink in. When it seemed she had finished, I spoke up. "Why tell me this now?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I never really wanted to confess the truth. I always thought I could spin a tale where you were at fault, and I even came up with a few excuses. But I couldn't bring myself to share them. Today, as I drove past your shop, I saw you and felt a compulsion to stop. I didn't know what I was going to say, only that I needed to say something if you'd let me. And what I said turned out to be the honest truth." "What did you hope to achieve with this confession?" I asked. "I wanted you to know it wasn't your fault. It was all my selfish desires and the lies he spun for me. I also wanted you to know that, whether you believe it or not, I never stopped loving you," she replied. "That's where I think you're being disingenuous," I countered. "You can't truly love someone and still lie and cheat on them. You did both." And if I remember correctly, you even planned to marry him. Are you still involved with him? I can't explain it any better than I have. I won't try to make you believe me. And no, I'm not with him. I haven't seen him since the day we saw those photos at the lawyer's office, she said. She sat in silence for a few moments, watching me work. I suppose I should go, she finally said, standing up. Tom. I looked at her. Is there any chance you could be forgiven enough to have another shot? She asked. I shook my head. You know where the door is, I said. After she left, I mulled over my ex-boss and ex-wife, reaffirming my suspicions about them. I wondered how my life might have turned out if I hadn't surprised my boss on the island. Would I still be trucking, resigned to the remnants of a broken dream? Instead, I chose to pursue crafting weather vanes and took the risk of financial ruin. Then, a flyer for a Renaissance festival arrived. I'd never heard of such a thing and discovered that Maryland claimed jousting and lacrosse as its official sports. Intrigued, I attended a nearby festival. There, vendors sold armor, swords, and other medieval goods. Inspired, I delved into researching and crafting shields and swords, selling them at festivals across the country. Bobby Foster helped me market my creations, signaling the start of a new venture. I continued to build and sell swords and shields, steadily gaining traction. During this period, I took on a difficult repair job for Mr. Peter Sanders' damaged gate. Despite my initial doubts, I completed the work with help from his daughter, Rachel, who brought me iced tea and kept me company. As we worked together, I developed an interest in armor making and wondered about its potential profitability. While dating a woman I met at the library, our relationship ended abruptly. Later, at a cinema, I unexpectedly encountered Rachel with her boyfriend. I overheard her say, "If you touch me there again, I'll cut off your balls." His hand fell from her shoulder. Irritated, she left, and her boyfriend begged her to return. I followed them, noting that Rachel did not tolerate his behavior. Although I couldn't hear their argument, I decided to intervene, something I had never done before. "Rachel, are you okay?" I asked. She glanced at me, taking a moment to recognize me. "No, that guy's like an octopus, and I'm tired of fighting him off. Can you give me a ride home?" "Sure," I agreed. As we headed to my truck, another man approached. "Rachel, are you okay?" he asked. "Now I am, yes," she replied. "Do you want me to take you home?" he offered. Without acknowledging me, she accepted his offer and they drove off without a word to me. I stood there, watching them leave, shook my head, and went home. A few days later, I was back at her house to address some railings along the walkway, as requested by Mr. Sanders. Rachel saw me and came over to say hello but didn't mention the incident at the cinema. Still annoyed by the previous encounter, I wasn't in the mood for conversation. She took the hint and left. I returned the next day with spare parts for the railings. As she headed toward the pool, Rachel stopped to chat. I mostly ignored her, still unsettled by the theater incident. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. "Do you remember what happened at the movies last week?" I replied. "You mean with the octopus guy?" she clarified. "Yes," I confirmed. "What about it?" "You asked me to give you a ride home. Do you remember that?" I pressed. "Of course," she said. "What happened after that?" "Nothing. Jimmy showed up and took me home," she said. "And you didn't see anything wrong with that?" I asked. "No." "Was there?" she responded, puzzled. "Not if you didn't see anything," I said, grabbing a hammer and starting to work on the metal, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. It didn't make sense. "Yeah," she was getting impatient. "I don't get you," she said. I looked her straight in the eye. "That's the problem," I stated, resuming my hammering. She got the message and left. I spent the rest of the day finishing the railings. My interest in armor continued to grow, leading me to research its construction thoroughly. I crafted my first piece and felt a sense of accomplishment. I sent a photo to Bobby for his feedback. "Stick with shields and swords," he advised, chuckling. "You're great at that. Armor takes a lot more effort to sell." A few days later, while at a local bar watching a baseball game, Rachel approached me. "I'm meeting friends for a drink. Want to join us?" she asked. "No thanks. I'm good here," I replied. She stood up to leave but hesitated. "Are you ever going to tell me what I did to make you mad?" she asked. "If I have to explain it, I feel sorry for you." "Enjoy your drinks," I said. I finished my beer and was about to leave when she came back. "Oh my God, Tom. I didn't mean to ignore you. That guy at the theater made me so angry I didn't know what I was doing. Please accept my apologies," she pleaded. I assumed someone at her table had overheard our conversation and corrected her. "Apologies accepted," I said. She smiled. "Will you join us now? Please, let's just have a drink. I owe you at least this." I smiled back. "Sure, thank you." The evening turned out to be enjoyable. Two of her friends reminded her of her manners. Throughout the night, I felt a renewed sense of sympathy toward her. As the group eventually dispersed, I left with Ginny. We had sat together at the table, and I took the opportunity to ask her about Rachel. "Ginny, what's the story with Rachel?" I inquired. She looked thoughtful before responding. "Look, Tom, I'm not her closest friend, but we're pretty tight. There's something about you that she likes. She regrets how she treated you. She made that clear to everyone at the table," Ginny explained. "Did she tell you that herself?" I asked. "She did. You've got to give her credit for being upfront about it," Ginny replied. "Do you want her number? Do you have it?" I asked. "No, I don't," she said. "Hand me your phone," I said, holding out my hand. She complied, and I watched as she entered Rachel's number. "Give her a call," Ginny suggested. The following week, on a quiet morning at the store, Rachel walked in. I figured she must have gotten the address from her father. "Did you have fun last time?" I asked as she approached. "I enjoyed it," she said. "I like your friends." "That's good," I replied. "But what about me? Do you like me?" She gave a small smile. "I remember you apologized." "And I remember accepting it," I acknowledged. "Then why aren't we friends?" she asked. I smiled. "I think we're working on it. An apology doesn't automatically mend a relationship. It shows you recognize your mistake and regret it. It doesn't guarantee that we'll become friends, but it does mean I see that you're genuinely sorry, assuming your apology was sincere." "It was," she assured me. "I believe you," I said. "Good. So, how about dinner tonight?" she proposed. I chuckled. "Why not? It'll be a good step toward building our friendship." "Great, when?" she asked. "How about tonight?" she suggested. And so, we went out for dinner. Our connection grew, and our friendship blossomed into something more. We dated for 2 months before becoming physically involved and engaged. But that was only the beginning. We wanted to spend every possible moment together. She would visit the store just to be with me, and we both cherished those moments. I could work while she read, and we didn't always need to talk or interact, just being in each other's presence was enough. During a late-night conversation in bed, I learned more about her past. She had been married briefly, but it was her revelation about her family that truly surprised me. Rachel revealed that Jonah Sanders wasn't her biological father. Her mother had married Sanders after her first husband, who owned a trucking company, passed away 2 years into their marriage. Rachel had an older brother, Jack, who had taken over the company. Despite doubts about his youthfulness, he proved capable, and the business thrived. I got out of bed, poured us drinks, and returned. "Tell me more about your brother," I said. "I've told you most of it," she replied. The company was doing well, so well that Jack and my ex-sister-in-law bought an island in Canada. Then some woman got involved, seducing him and leading to their divorce. She had her husband start driving for Jack, and they set him up. My sister-in-law divorced him, took half the company, and they had to sell it. I took a deep gulp of my drink. "How much did they extort from him?" I asked. "My brother never told me the exact amount, but they did get something," she said. "Do you remember their names?" I inquired. "I did, but I've forgotten," she answered. I decided to be honest, despite my fears about it ending our relationship. I chose to have one last intimate moment with her before revealing the truth. Afterward, despite the unparalleled connection we shared, I knew I had to come clean. As I dressed and sat on the edge of her bed, I began, "It's time we revisit your brother's divorce. Was what you told me the official version, or his perspective?" "That's what he told me, so I took it as the truth," she replied. "Why do you ask?" "Because everything happened differently," I said. "What do you mean?" she asked, looking puzzled. I recounted the true events, and halfway through, she abruptly got out of bed, still unclothed, and listened intently. When I finished, I clarified that Emma and I had simply ended our marriage without any extortion involved. "You're lying." "Get out," she snapped. "I'm not lying." "This is the truth," I insisted. She threw a pillow at me. "You're lying. Get out, and don't come back with these lies." I left, feeling a sense of loss but cherishing the memory of our final closeness. Life continued, and I found myself in another social lull, unable to break free from my rut. One evening, in a moment of indulgence, I decided to dine at a high-end restaurant. After finishing my main course, I noticed Rachel and her brother a few tables away, celebrating with a small cake. Summoning my courage, I paid the bill and approached their table, boldly sitting down. They looked at me as if I were an intruder. Her brother was the first to speak. "Are you sure you're at the right table?" he asked, clearly confused. "Indeed," I said. "I think it's time you told your sister the truth about your divorce." "She knows about it," he retorted. "Evidently, she doesn't know the real truth, so you need to set the record straight," I said firmly. "Get lost," he snapped. "Rachel, what's going on?" she nearly shouted. "Get him out of here." Miraculously, a waiter appeared. "Is everything all right here?" he asked. "This guy," Rachel said, pointing at me, sat down uninvited and mistreated my brother. "I want him to leave." "Certainly, sir." "I must ask you to depart," the waiter insisted. I looked at Lawrence. "You're something else," I said. "Just go," Rachel demanded. As I left, I suspected it might be our final meeting. Back in my shop, I focused on my favorite projects, axes and chainmail. The next weekend, I prepared for a festival, bringing along shields, axes, and chainmail samples for Bobby. He secured me a vendor pass and introduced me to Carla, who was dressed in period attire with a revealing gown. "Bobby, meet Tom." "Tom, this is Carla," he said. "Tom crafts our pieces and has some new ones today." "That's what I do," I said, heading to my truck to retrieve the new items. Bobby and Carla regarded the new pieces with the awe usually reserved for rare artifacts. Amidst the festival's energetic buzz, we shared a meal and reveled in the lively atmosphere. I wanted to delve deeper into Carla's background, but the opportunity slipped away. Later, Bobby provided some context. "She and her sister run festivals all over the country," Bobby explained. "If you hadn't shown up, she would have been here anyway." "Why didn't you mention that sooner?" "I could have booked a motel," I said. Not a chance, he replied. They're all fully booked. The next day, Carla stole the show, and we had a lucrative weekend, selling out all our stock. Afterward, Bobby persuaded me to stay another night before heading home. Back at the workshop, I dived into crafting chain mail, pushing through exhaustion without much sleep. Around 3 a.m., a knock on my door startled me. It was Rachel, visibly drunk and flanked by police officers. "Are you Tom Harris?" one officer asked. "Yes," I responded. "Is she your girlfriend?" he inquired. "I know her, but she's not my girlfriend," I clarified. "Are you certain?" "She's adamant that you're her boyfriend," the officer pressed. "Not at all. The last time I saw her, she called me a liar and threw me out," I explained. "We're taking her with us," the officer said. "Where are you taking her?" I asked. "To spend the night at the station," he replied. "No, please don't do that." "I'll look after her," I offered. "Are you sure?" he questioned. "No, but I can't let her stay at the station," I insisted. I helped her inside and settled her on my bed, the only place available. I considered sleeping on the couch, which was preferable to the air mattress in Bobby's tent, but I opted for my own bed instead, even though it was now occupied by a snoring drunk woman. The next morning, I woke up and headed to work. I didn't hear a peep from Rachel all day and figured she'd still be asleep when I got back. I was wrong. She was gone, and the apartment was immaculate. I looked for a note but found nothing. Despite my efforts, I couldn't finish a single new piece of chain mail. Bobby stopped by to collect the shields, swords, and axes I had stashed. We debated hiring additional help but found that skilled metalworkers were scarce. Instead, we decided to train new recruits, placing ads in the local paper and festival newsletters. One Friday evening, as I worked on designing a machine to enhance chain mail production, I was deep in thought. There were machines available, but I was determined to improve upon them. It was late, and I was exhausted when there was a knock on the door. It was a sober Rachel. "Thank you for taking care of me last night," she said. I nodded. I tried to tidy up. "Everything's fine." She nodded back, clearly unsure of what to say, and we stood in silence. "Look, it's been a long day, and I need to get some rest," I said. I gently maneuvered past her, closed and locked the door, then headed to my car. "Good night," I added. As I was about to get into the car, I heard her call out. "You were right. My brother lied. I'm sorry." I gave a small wave over my shoulder, got into the car, and drove home. My fascination with armor making only grew. After Bobby critiqued my initial design, I dove into research and crafted a new suit that would serve as a model for future pieces. They were intricate, time-consuming, and incredibly challenging, but I thrived on the challenge. Ready to showcase my work, I brought the new suit to the next festival. Bobby was impressed, and though we could have sold it multiple times over, we chose to display it as a testament to my craftsmanship. Visitors admired it, gave feedback, and expressed interest in customizations. My festival ventures became increasingly successful and fulfilling. I bought a trailer to transport my tools and materials, allowing me to move smoothly between festivals. Sometimes I worked at a booth, engaging with attendees, while other times I crafted in the private vendor area. One evening, between festivals, I chatted with my father and marveled at the unexpected success of Renaissance metalwork. Who would have thought so many people are interested in armor and can afford it? "These items aren't exactly cheap," I remarked. After the festival season, I started dating a woman I'd met at the local car dealership. I was considering buying a new truck to replace my dad's aging welding truck. The plan was to equip the new truck with welding gear, sell the old one, and maybe upgrade to something newer and bigger. While she was getting her car serviced, I admired a new truck outside the showroom. We struck up a conversation and exchanged phone numbers. Our first date led to a second, and then many more. One evening, after I drove her home, she invited me inside. We shared a second drink, and I settled onto her sofa while she stood in front of me, unbuttoning her blouse. "Do you mind if I get more comfortable?" she asked. "Not at all, as long as I get to watch and enjoy," I replied. She grinned mischievously. "That's the whole idea. I undress while you watch, then you undress while I watch. Then we'll see how it goes from there. You've certainly got everything planned out." "Oh, absolutely." As her blouse slipped off and her skirt followed, I reached for her underwear, but she gently pushed my hands away. "Let me handle this. Just watch and enjoy. You do like watching a lady undress, don't you?" "I'm not sure. I've never really paid much attention before," I admitted. She laughed deeply. "I hope you're better in bed than you are at lying." Her bra joined the pile of clothes on the floor. "You're quite confident, aren't you?" I said. "Very," she replied. "Now it's your turn." I began unbuttoning my shirt. "Slow down, tiger. We have all night. Let me enjoy the show." I eased my movements, and she licked her lips with anticipation. I slipped off my shoes, loosened my belt, and unzipped my trousers. As I began to lower them, she gently placed her hands over mine and sank to her knees, guiding my pants down to the floor. She stopped there, looking up at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "So, what's next? The t-shirt or the shorts?" she inquired. "Let's start with the t-shirt." "We'll save the best for last," I suggested. I stripped off my t-shirt and tossed it aside. She picked it up, inhaled its scent, and purred, I love the smell of men." By the time I left, it was around 3 in the morning. On the drive home, my thoughts kept drifting back to Rachel and our past encounters. I weighed the comparisons between her and my recent experience, struggling to determine which had been more fulfilling. The relationship with my new partner lasted 4 months before it fizzled out. Later that evening, I noticed a slew of missed calls and urgent messages from Rachel. "Tom, please call me as soon as you get this. It's important, no matter what time it is," her message implored. I decided to heed her urgency and dialed her number. She answered after a couple of rings. "Hello, Tom," she said, her voice thick with sleep. "I might have dozed off while waiting for your call. I tried to stay awake." "All right, I'm here. What's the emergency?" I asked. "I wanted to tell you that my brother lied about his divorce. You were right all along, and I'm truly sorry. You've already apologized for that. Is there something else?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yes," she hesitated. "Can we meet again? I miss you. Honestly, given the situation with your brother and what he did to my wife, there's no way we can make this work. Even if we tried, it would only lead to complications and discomfort for me. I can't put myself through that." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I expected you to say that, but I was hoping you wouldn't. Goodbye, Tom." The Renaissance festivals were back, and I was fully immersed. I secured my passes, purchased a tent and camping gear, and set off. Most of my time was spent assisting Bobby at his booth, and in my spare moments, I focused on creating new items. My skills in armor making had significantly improved, and at each festival, at least one of my pieces found a new home. Each creation demanded a lot of time and effort, but the work was rewarding. 2 days after wrapping up one festival, Bobby asked if I could join him for the next. I agreed, and he brought his trailer loaded with everything I needed. I loaded up my truck and left my trailer at home, taking his instead. We worked 3 consecutive festivals, gaining significant attention. By the 3rd event, I even demonstrated my new chainmail machine. The next festival was in Philadelphia and spanned 11 days, making it one of the largest in the country. This festival was unique, starting on a Thursday, continuing through the following weekend, and ending the weekend after. I spent 2 weeks at home preparing, focusing on armor. My father had become adept at crafting shields, axes, and swords, and I worked late into the night. One evening, around midnight, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a very drunk Rachel stumbling into my arms. "Is this your girlfriend?" one of the police officers accompanying her asked. "If it helps her avoid trouble tonight, then sure," I replied, guiding her to my bedroom and gently placing her on the bed. I showered, shaved, changed into pajamas, and set out clothes for the next day, preparing for the possibility of her returning in a similar state. The next morning, I checked on Rachel, who was still sound asleep. I debated whether to stay and try to talk things through or just let it go. That evening, I went to work. When I returned home, I found the apartment immaculate. Rachel had cleaned the kitchen, and in the bathroom, my toothbrush and toothpaste were in different places. I rearranged them, noticing everything was tidied up. I made a frozen enchilada for dinner but didn't have much of an appetite. The next morning, I left for the Philadelphia Festival, bringing all my materials for shields and chainmail. I planned to conduct numerous demonstrations. The first day was phenomenal, and it only got better. On Sunday, a large crowd watched my demonstration almost all day. By the end of the festival, Bobby and I were both exhausted. Evenings in the vendor area were always lively, with people cooking, playing music, drinking, practicing sword fights, repairing or trying on armor, and engaging in various activities. It was common to hear intimate sounds or see campers gently swaying. After the crowd had dispersed, I sat outside my tent, thinking about how nice it would be to have someone to cuddle with. Rachel was probably free, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. Monday's crowd was moderate, but foot traffic remained steady throughout the day. Attendance records weren't broken, but it was still bustling. While demonstrating the intricate process of chainmail assembly, I glanced up and saw Rachel watching me. I continued my demonstration, inviting questions from the onlookers. When none came, the crowd eventually thinned out, leaving Rachel standing there. "Do you enjoy this?" she asked. "Yes, I do," I answered. "You're quite good at it," she said before turning and blending into the crowd. I didn't see her again until the end of the event. On Wednesday, my parents arrived with additional shields and axes. I gave them a tour, though they didn't seem entirely pleased with my setup. My mother especially disapproved of how I had arranged my tent. Despite this, the remainder of the week and the weekend were successful, and Bobby and I were satisfied as we returned home. I took a day off, and my father helped with chainmail work in the shop. As we discussed plans for a larger motorhome and trailer, the door opened, and Rachel walked in. "This festival was fantastic," she said. "A few friends and I are heading to the next one nearby. We're even talking about going in armor." "That sounds fun," I replied noncommittally. "Will you be there?" she asked. "Probably," I said. My father and I continued working, avoiding eye contact with her. "Can I come with you?" she asked. "It's not very practical." "I'll be there from Wednesday to Sunday," I explained. "No worries, we can get a motel room," she suggested. "That's unlikely. Those book up months in advance," I said. "So where do you stay then?" she asked. She asked, "Where do you sleep?" "In a tent," I replied. "That sounds pretty cozy." "Maybe we could share it," she proposed. "It's a bit cramped," I said. "Cramped can be cozy," she countered with a smile. My father shot me a glance, gave a knowing grin, and excused himself. "Look," Rachel said, "you'll never fully forget that my brother had an affair with your wife, and that means we can't have a serious relationship. But that doesn't mean we can't have something more casual, right? We clearly enjoy each other's company." I hesitated, weighing my words. "Why not take advantage of what we have?" she continued. You can date others if you want, but if you're not getting what you need, I can step in. What do you think? I looked at her, struggling with the idea. You're wonderful, and I've said it before, but the idea of sharing doesn't sit well with me. I can't just engage in something physical with you knowing you might leave for someone else, even if you haven't yet. We both deserve meaningful relationships. She stepped closer, touched my face gently, and kissed me. You're not getting it. I'm already in a relationship. If you want to date others, go ahead. But I'll always be here for you whenever you need me. I don't need anyone else. I love you and I'm committed to this arrangement. She kissed me again before leaving. My father, who had clearly been watching, turned to me and asked, "What are you going to do about her?" I stared at the door she had just exited, feeling lost. Honestly, Dad, I don't know. What do you suggest? You've got two choices, he said. Either you accept that her brother's affair with your ex-wife might mean she'll stick around, or you leave town and keep a low profile. It might be time to consider what your mother and I discussed. What's that? I asked. We'll talk about it when we get home, he replied. At the dinner table later, my father updated my mother on the situation with Rachel. I think it's time we give Tom the gift we talked about, he said. I think you're right, my mother agreed. What gift? I asked. I don't like the idea of you staying in a tent, my mother said. We're going to get you a motorhome, my father announced. Arguing with them seemed pointless, and honestly, I thought it was a good idea. It took a week to find the right one. With my Class A CDL, I didn't need driving lessons. I hugged them both, thanked them, and bought a trailer to tow behind it. I set up the trailer so I could work inside if needed and connected the power from the motorhome. The setup was perfect. I focused on crafting armor while my father worked on shields, swords, and axes. We both found immense satisfaction in our work. Bobby, seeing my new setup, couldn't help but feel envious and asked if I'd christened the motorhome yet. What do you mean? I asked. Have you had any fun in it yet? He clarified with a grin. No, I replied. He grinned wider. Do you mind if Carla and I chuckled. Go ahead. He texted her, and she arrived in 10 minutes. They went off to the motorhome, holding hands and laughing. When they came back, Bobby announced, "We wanted you to be the first to know. Carla and I are getting married." She hugged me and said, "It was your van that convinced me." Thank you. That weekend, I barely saw anyone, but the motorhome smelled of perfume and something else. Back home for a week, Rachel saw the van and dropped by. I was in need of some company and knew I could easily get her into bed. I gave her a tour, and she was impressed. "This is so much better than a tent," she said. "Yes, it is," I agreed. "It's got a double bed, right?" she asked. "Yes, and a pretty decent closet. And I bet the shower is roomy enough too." "It probably is," I said. As we stood in the living area, she moved closer to me. "Has it been broken in yet?" she asked with a playful glint in her eye. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she was getting at. "Has anyone had fun in it yet?" she whispered. "No, it's still brand new," I fibbed. "Well," she said softly, "we could break it in now or wait until this weekend." Since we were in my parents' yard, now wasn't an option. "What do you mean by this weekend?" I asked. "After the festival each evening," she suggested. "We could do that," I agreed, though I added, "but this is Southern Virginia. Even if I said yes, it's too far for you to drive." "You're right," she conceded. "So I'll just come with you." "Did you not hear what I just said?" I protested. She pulled me closer, looking into my eyes. "Tom, you admitted I'm the best you've ever had. And I feel the same way about you." I know you have feelings for me too. We should make the most of our time together. Plus, I have a dress that would be perfect for the festival. You'll love it." She kissed me tenderly, as if she were truly in love with me. "I'm leaving at 5 in the morning on Tuesday." "I won't be ready," I said, feeling unsure. "You don't have to be," she replied. And she was right. She unpacked her things, stocked the kitchen, and by midnight Monday, she was comfortably settled in the motorhome's bed. As soon as I got behind the wheel Tuesday morning, she joined me in the passenger seat, wearing only a robe. I could tell because she kept shooting me knowing glances every time I looked her way. She met Carla, and both women wore low-cut dresses that accentuated their curves. I could barely wait for the workday to end. When the festival closed, Bobby and I shut down the booths. Carla and Rachel were cooking dinner in the motorhome when we arrived. Rachel's cooking was fantastic, far exceeding my expectations. After Bobby and Carla left, Rachel asked if I wanted to shower with her. There was enough space for two, and from there, we moved to the bed. That night marked the beginning of many nights and days spent enjoying each other's company in that motorhome. This was 3 years ago. Initially, Rachel's family tried to convince her that I only let her travel with me to get back at her brother. He had told them that Emma and I were responsible for his divorce, not him. Clearly, none of them had been in court to see the truth. And like Rachel, they believed his lies. Rachel provided them with copies of my divorce decree and statements from her ex-sister-in-law. Her brother stayed in town, causing a few more divorces before deciding that moving to the other side of the country was better for his health. Rachel now has several new dresses for festivals. They no longer emphasize her belly as much. She never explicitly said she wanted to be a wife before becoming a mother, but I can sense it's on her mind. It's on mine too.